Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, following the 3 H's of the channel and all that good stuff. And in this video, it's all about Appalachia, or Appalachia, depending on where you live. But it's going to get weird and crazy and scary. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. This was sent in to me by TT, so TT, I hope I can do your story justice. I got a story for you, as told by my female friend, CH, in Ada, Ohio. Tonight's ghost story has been brought to you once again by the creepy woods behind my house. There are a lot of fireworks going off around the house this evening, so I decided that it would be a good time to take my dog outside for a walk along the property in hopes of getting her acclimated to the celebratory explosions that are so common this time of year. As we walked the west side of the property line, I could not help but feel like I was being watched. If you have ever heard me talk about the woods behind our property, you'll know that this is not out of the ordinary. Nor is it out of the ordinary to see on occasion pale blue lights dancing on the edge of the woods, or hear men's voices. But this is normally something that is experienced in the winter and the spring, rarely in the summer or fall. Luckily, being the descendant of some of the earliest settlers of Appalachia, I was warned as a child to ignore such things, and that's what I have done for the past 6 years. For the most part. Tonight was different, as I was standing at the edge of the field, focusing my attention on firework training lady, and not on the sets of eyes burning into me. I heard something that I have never heard come out of those woods before. For about 10 seconds, my dog and I heard the distinct sound of a fiddle roughly sawing out a tune that sounded straight out of the 1800s. It sounded disembodied, like a long-forgotten memory of a song. It was similar to an echo in an old barn. After it stopped, I continued to stand there, thinking that someone must be trespassing in the neighbor's woods, listening to mid-19th century Appalachian folk music on a boombox, in the dark, all while the fireworks exploded to the south and west of the woods, because I guess that would make sense. After 10 minutes of just hanging out on the edge of the wheat field, staring into the woods, listening for the music, or a ghostly voice beckoning me to join them, or even the devil to appear and invite me to a fiddling contest, I bailed. I thought, great, so now I have ghostly fiddle players wandering around the woods along with everything else. Any Appalachian, Ohio natives know what this could be? It's the woods behind the old skate pond on the 309. It's the east corner that used to be a dumping ground. And yes, my dog did great, but the goats still hate the fireworks. Recently, I had a flashback to when I was a kid, and my mom told me this story about a cryptid that she claims to have seen. For background, this was a dark and rainy night in the late 1990s in Appalachia, northeastern Tennessee, and she claims that something resembling a pterosaur landed in the road out in front of her car. Once the headlights hit upon the creature, it glared in her direction, but had a mouth resembling a smile almost. It flew off shortly after that. As far as I know, there's not much in local legend or even folklore resembling a creature like this. For added speculation, there's also a pretty sketchy business in the local area as well. It's a local chemical company that has long been rumored to be improperly dumping waste and byproducts in places they shouldn't. Fishermen have been claiming to have catches with multiple eyes, more fins than they need, or other deformities, and a lot have close connections in other countries. There's also a rumored secret military hangar in the side of the mountain that many people have claimed to have seen open up and planes shoot out. It might seem far-fetched to someone outside the area, but this area is notorious for stuff like that and has a history of weird secret military stuff going on dating back to World War II regarding the work done on the atomic bomb in Oak Ridge. So what the hell was this thing? Is it related to other nefarious cover-ups? Anyone else have any similar experiences or stories on the creature, or any insight as to what it might be or the weird happenings? This happened somewhere in the northeastern part of the Appalachian Range. There's very dense forests filled with old stone walls and foundations. There's lots of really old colonial houses too. Suffice to say, I find this region of the US to be the spookiest by far. So, this is what happened. I was on a resident summer camp every year since I was 10. It was generally a blast, and usually went for 2 or 3 weeks, but most kids only stayed one at a time. This camp has a lot of history, a lot of folklore, tradition, and all that. It's been around almost 100 years. Every week, it was a 1-week program, with the same program every week for the summer. There was a night hike up to the haunted area of the camp. It was a lone trail that loops way out into the edge of the property of the camp, where there are old foundations, about half a mile in the middle of the woods, away from anyone else in the camp. We go there to tell stories in the pitch black. The counselors seem to take it very seriously. They stop along the trail to look for signs that we aren't welcome. Some weeks, we would get all the way to the ruins. Other times, they would have to turn around and tell stories at the beginning of the trail. So that's a bit of backstory. Fast forward to when I was 12. The older kids convinced me to come on the hike. I get there. My favorite counselor was running it, and his oddly serious tone was really unnerving compared to his normal, jovial enthusiasm. He gives a spiel about respecting the land, listening to the counselors, and taking everything seriously. I'm thinking, oh crap, this is legit, isn't it? We start hiking. There's no flashlights. We're not allowed to talk. The counselors had to focus on the noises coming from the woods on either side. They hear an owl and end up turning around. We tell stories back at the field where we started. They started to tell the stories. An old Dutch or Hessian settlement was once on the property, and it lost contact with the nearby settlements. Englishmen eventually arrived to find the whole town dead where they stood. They can do nothing but make a mass grave and burn the bodies, fearing it was a disease. Years later, the area is now a farmland, grazing pasture for a herd of cows. This is the 1840s. A bunch of cows go missing. A farmer finds them lying dead by the ruins of the old Dutch settlement. Even more years later, the area is now a scout camp, the 1930s. Scouts would go exploring up in the area and tell stories about the ruins up there. One group of scouts decides to spend the night there. They are found the next day, dead in their sleeping bags. The camp actually attempts and succeeds in a cover-up by saying that the kids had died of some unknown disease. The camp was brand new, and this was the Great Depression, so this was very bad optics, which meant going under. So, 40 years later, the 1970s, an archaeological dig is being performed. The lead archaeologist slowly becomes fanatical about finding the mass grave and confirming the legends. He stays alone on the site one weekend to continue digging. The team returns on Monday. They find him lifeless in his tent. Now, hearing these stories, they scared the hell out of me back then. I didn't sleep at all that night. So, years later, I was now one of the older kids that have been going there for weeks every summer. I think the stories aren't true. I'm believing that the counselors are just trying to spook us. My friends think it would be funny if we went on a hike to scare the young lads. We decide to do that. We end up going further towards the ruins, but the counselors have us turn around. Soon, they ask us to pick up the pace, and suddenly, we're all sprinting out of the woods in a panic. My friend thinks it's funny. He screams, "What's that in the woods?" to try and scare the kids. We have a good laugh, and we sleep well that night. But now, it gets a little weird. A few years later, I joined the staff and had been working there already for a few summers. I was surprised about how seriously that they all took it. I started gaining trust and talking to the older staff members who had been working there for decades. They completely believe that there's something very wrong in that corner of the camp, and they take it very seriously. Apparently, there are a lot of crazies in rural New England. They found evidence of occult and demonic rituals being performed near the ruins by people who believed the legends. Older staff members go there to steal the trail and prevent this stuff from affecting the rest of the camp. They literally burn sage and perform an exorcism on the trail every year to the day. Scouts dying in the 30s is not a myth, and there was a legit cover-up. The counselors take the owls very seriously. They seem to act as a warning or something. The quick rundown on that is that the owls are not what they seem. So I have one more for tonight. So, at the time I was an experienced staff member who is now aware that this stuff is taken very seriously, even when there's no kids around. I still had never experienced anything firsthand. I end up volunteering to help run the hike. There's a huge group that week. We needed extra counselors to help out. Midway through the hike, I'm walking right in front of one of my staff friends. I pass a particular tree, and I get this crazy sensation of being unnerved, shivers up and down my spine. I ask my friend, "Hey, did you feel that?" He replies, "Feel what?" as he passes the tree, and he goes silent. He says, "Yeah, actually, what the hell is that?" We ask the other staff members if this may mean that we should turn around. They decide to keep going. We go 100 meters up the hill, and I distinctly remember not being able to shake the feeling that we weren't welcome. At the front of the group, a massive tree falls over right across the trail in front of the lead counselor, less than a yard away. Everyone else heard the huge tree just come down. Everyone's frozen in their tracks. The lead counselor is audibly terrified, tells us to turn around and get the hell out of the woods. For some reason, none of us could sleep that night, despite the tree. I know it's not a whole lot, but that's some weird stuff that happened while I was working there. I don't tell this story very often. The reason for this is because most people would hear it and just consider it to be a joke or call it BS. It's not that exciting as some of the other ones you might hear, but it really messed with my head at the time. I wasn't able to go outside on our property for like 2 years unless several people were with me. Back then I was living on a farm in rural northeast Pennsylvania, Susquehanna County. The farm was like 600 acres. As you can imagine, I grew up pretty much always outside. We always had dirt bikes and ATVs, or four-wheelers as we call them. So I was working on the farm. It was a dairy farm, and obviously was outside doing that as well. So I knew the property like the back of my hand, and I was 16 at the time. One day, I was riding my dirt bike alone. It was in this area on the farm that we call the Pines. It's a wooded area of all evergreen trees, and it's up a steep hill. No one ever really went there besides me, my brothers, cousins, and other family members on our dirt bikes or four-wheelers. Sometimes my dad or uncles went to hunt. I took a steep trail up to the top that was along a stone wall. There's an intersection with another trail that runs through the pines. It was around dusk, and I could see something that was weird. It was maybe 7 feet high at most. It had 4 legs and no hair that I could see. It looked thin. Literally, my first thought was that it was a mangy bear, but this was just odd. It obviously saw me since I had the bike running. It turns toward me. I knew then it wasn't a bear. It still gives me creeps to even think about this uncanny valley kind of feeling I got from it. The face of this thing was like a person, just bigger, dark eyes and a big mouth. Literally, the only comparison that I can think to make is think of Golem from Lord of the Rings. It just froze there. Its mouth was open. I froze too. It was starting to get dark, so it was getting hard to see. Then, it turned around and bolted away incredibly fast. I stalled my bike, trying to take off quick. It took 10 kicks to restart. It's a 1994 Honda XR250, if you're wondering. I was sweating like crazy. My heart was in my throat. I just take off as fast as I can when I get started. I go home, and I never told anybody. My parents would just call it BS since I was a nervous kid. They would just say that I was seeing a bear, a cow, or a dog. I'm around 30 years old now, and I'm still shaken up by it. It was darker, but I know damn well that it wasn't a bear. I can't explain it at all. And even in the descriptions of what you guys call skinwalkers, the stuff doesn't match up. I've never even seen it again, or even heard anyone else talk about anything even remotely similar. This wasn't even out in the complete middle of nowhere either. There are houses within 3 miles in almost all directions. Anyways, I figured if anyone will not just call me crazy, I thought I'd share. It was 14 years ago, so it's been a while, and yeah, that's my story. I've never really been back to the Pines ever again, near dark. So this happened in the late 90s, probably 1997 or 98. It was in the spring, or maybe early in the summer. I was just a kid. We were living in a huge old farmhouse with my mom, my dad, 2 sisters, my brother, and my great uncle. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it was a pretty big house because it had been built on many times over the years by successive generations. This isn't really important for the story, but it's just a cool fact. There's also decently sized fields out in front and to the west of my house. The east is just woods for miles and miles. So we spend most of our time, especially my time, as a kid, just in the woods, with my siblings. We were all pretty close in age, and there was 2 kids with us who lived down the road the other direction. One day, it's all of us minus my oldest sister in the woods. We were chilling in a teepee that we made. and we were all bored. The neighbor kids have a cousin who's with us. He's known to be a delinquent. He tells them that there's a witch who lives in the woods. We all think this guy is super cool, so we believe him without question. Normally, we're too scared to do anything like this, but we're so bored. None of us have a TV or anything like that because we were poor and my parents were convinced that TV rots the brain. So, we go out looking for a witch hut, despite none of us knowing where to look or what a witch hut even looks like. We were starting in mid-afternoon. We all know the woods pretty well, so we can go fairly deep without getting lost. A few hours in, we find this old cabin. It looks to be about 70 years old, maybe older, but at the time we made jokes saying that this could be the house of Abraham Lincoln. So it was covered in rocks and rotting wood, absolutely decrepit. Of course, we try to go in, but it's locked. My older brother doesn't want to seem like a pussy, so he kicks down the door. It practically disintegrates. The first thing we notice is the smell. The second thing we notice is a huge hole under the wall. It's 4 feet across, 2 feet tall, deeper than we can see because it's darker in this part of the woods. The third thing we notice is the food. Everywhere there's food. Apples, vegetables, meat, burgers, chips, carrots, eggs, bread rolls. Everything you could buy in a 10-mile radius, and everything is rotted and covered in mold. There were a couple dead animals in there too, but they were just rats or a bird. The food has mushrooms growing out of it. In fact, everything has mushrooms growing out of it. We can't even see through the windows because there's a solid wall of fungus that has grown nearly covering the wall. There might have been furniture here at one point, but all has submitted to the almighty fungoid force. So, down this tunnel that we see in the wall, it's also all fungus. There's nothing to see here, and we're all grossed out, so we leave. As we're debating whether or not that this was the witch hut, we notice that there's a trail of assorted mushrooms. They're mostly brown, and they smell awful, but we follow the trail. It comes out at the same side of the house as the hole. These woods are thick, so it gets hard to follow after a while, and eventually becomes impossible after they seem to end off of a cliff. We turn back, disappointed that we didn't get to see the witch, but we're more afraid of this obviously unnatural amount of fungus. As we turn back, we follow the mushroom trail again, but we realize we don't recognize any of the surroundings. We start to freak out, but my older brother calms us down. Eventually, the mushroom trail reaches a pond. We think, this isn't a cabin. What the hell? It's getting darker now. We're all scared. We turn back the other way. We figure that we'll eventually get to a road. But after a while, we see another trail of fungus. We figured we followed the wrong trail maybe, and that this one will definitely lead us back to the cabin, so we follow it. After a while, we notice that this fungus is getting weird. It looks like it's starting to glow. Some mushrooms do this. We learned about it in school, so we don't think a whole lot of it. A few minutes later, it's glowing really brightly. The farther we follow it, the brighter it gets. Eventually, it leads into a random thicket. We realize that this is the wrong way again. The younger neighbor kid starts to cry. Everyone tells him to shut up. There could be wild animals here, but he keeps crying and wailing. The mushrooms have stopped glowing, and he's trying to run away. And then we clue in again. the mushrooms have stopped glowing. Nobody can really see it all. Then we see a glow coming from behind some trees. We think that it's a lamp from a house or something. We all collectively sigh in relief. As we start to walk toward it, something walks out of the trees. My sister begins to scream. It looks like a really tall man with the face of a dog and a vague smile. He has no eyes, and he seems to be made of this fungus. Imagine the clickers from The Last of Us, but with a dog-like face coming out of the crown. It's glowing faintly, and it's lurching toward us. We all turn as they're blindly running. We pass by a tree that we've all seen before, and after a few minutes of running we stop because it looks like this thing is gone. But then I lean back against a tree, and it caves. We think, what the hell? It's just hundreds of brown mushroom stalks winding together, and then, not even 5 feet behind the fallen tree, is the thing that we were running from. We book it again, faster this time. My older brother now has to carry the neighbor kid, who's just screaming and wailing. We see the cabin. We know where we are now. Except now, the cabin looks weird, just off. And it has that same faint glow as the mushrooms did. The rocks that we thought we saw have opened up and are now just huge black mushrooms with green undersides. 2 more minutes of sprinting, racing for our lives, and we come out in a completely unfamiliar field. There's a house. We run onto the porch, bawling our eyes out. The owners come to the door. It turns out that they're distant family of mine. They live 15 miles in the opposite direction that we were walking all day. It's 10 p.m. Our parents have apparently been freaking out. They've called the police, the fire department, whoever else they can. We get home by 11. We're still crying. We tell our parents what happened, but they chalk up the crying to the beating that we're going to get, and they don't believe the story at all. I wouldn't go into the woods until the next year, and out of curiosity, I did try to find the cabin again, but it was like it was never there. It was just regular woods. Mushrooms still psych me out hard. The only thing I can really get out of this is that it was some kind of fae, I guess. Maybe a mushroom spirit? I don't know. But something was trying to lure us out into the middle of the woods and probably kill us, which it damn near did. There have apparently been stories of nearby abandoned buildings being totally consumed by mushrooms, but I never took interest in those stories because I don't really have a desire to see Mr. Mushroomhead dog thing again. The neighbor's cousin, Andy, he was responsible for a lot of the stupid stuff that we all ended up doing, and the younger neighbor kid ended up really screwing us over multiple times. His name was Preston. I have other stories, but that one is the most scarring to me, personally. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. And in the description as well is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. But remember, just liking the video, commenting, and viewing it, subscribing, and all that great stuff is good too. And remember that if you subscribe to turn on the notification bell. I never thought I'd say that, but some people were saying that they weren't getting notified whenever I put out a new video. And with that, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed pulling up a stump, and I hope you have a good week. I'll put some videos up here in case you're interested in watching more. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.